My name is Goldman. I'm the director and founder of Goldman and Associates. Our firm has a primary focus on family law issues here in Michigan. And today we're continuing our video series designed to educate and inform the public, so please subscribe to our channel. We got a very interesting question from our audience. It's a very common question that people wonder about and how to deal with it. And the question is, how do we explain that we're getting divorced to the kids? You have a family unit, you got mom, dad, and the kids. You're all sort of one group. How do you explain that now you're getting divorced? And how do you explain it in such a way where the kids won't feel that, they think the love is forever? And how do you explain that, well, no, it's not forever because we're splitting up. All of a sudden they feel that maybe you might not love them forever. In other words, there's a lot of things that go through the mind of a child. How do you explain this? Well, there's a couple approaches to it. They're not all right and they're not all wrong. It's going to be very, very dependent on what goes on in your household, what relationship you have with your spouse and your children, and how you approach this. I'll tell you one thing though, it's probably the first discussion that you and your ex should have as you approach the divorce. How are we going to tell it to the kids? How are we going to explain this? Now, in its wisdom, the law sets up a 6-month waiting period with children. So parents kind of go through a process of divorce. The whole family sort of goes through this process. And if handled appropriately, the kids are no worse for the wear. But you really have to figure out how to do it. It's, how did you tell your kids other tragedies? How did you handle that? How did you tell them that grandpa died? How did you deal with that? So you're probably, if you've lived in a family unit long enough to have kids, there's probably some bad news that has to be broken to children. I would say this, and obviously it's going to depend on the age of the children and their level of maturity. But I would tell them like this. I would say to them, look, you know that your mom and I, we both love you. You have to express your love to the children. And no matter what happens in life, that never changes. And you can remind them how when they got bad grades, it didn't change. And when they broke the window, it didn't change. Things like that don't change because they are your children. They're your blood. They come from you. And therefore, as a natural function of your DNA being in them and all of that, you're always going to love your kids. But you have to explain to them that that's going to continue, but it's just going to be on a slightly different basis. There's going to be a change. Because while you're both still going to be parents, you're just not going to be spouses anymore. And there's going to be a division. And there's going to be a separate household. And focus on the positive aspects of it. You're going to be able to spend more time with dad in a concentrated way. More time with mom in a concentrated way. Less time with both of them at odds with each other. There'll be less arguments in the house. It'll be better. And make sure they understand it's not their fault. It's just that some relationships that are not natural relationships where two people meet each other, sometimes those don't work out on a permanent basis. That's why there is a process of divorce. Children don't divorce their parents. Parents don't divorce their children. Don't get into the whole adoption thing. But in most cases, children don't get into that. You can explain there's a legal process for this because the law recognizes that sometimes relationships don't necessarily work out in that way, but you'll always be parents. And you'll always be focused on them, and they'll always be the most important thing in your life. And that's why you're sitting down and talking to them even before the whole divorce begins to tell them, this is what we're doing. It's not going to impact you in any way. We're going to make every effort to still be a family unit. It's just certain things we're going to do separately from now on. And hopefully, with time and maturity, they'll be able to understand that and work within the positive aspects of that for a fruitful outcome. If you have any questions about that, reach out, and we'll be glad to help you out.